My name is Dean Maines, and I lead an organization here at the Opus College of Business known as the Veritas Institute. And on behalf of the Opus College, as well as the broader University of St. Thomas, I would like to welcome you to this event, the 2017 Winning with Integrity Symposium. The Winning with Integrity series is organized and hosted by two centers here at the Opus College of Business, the Veritas Institute and the Center for Ethical Organizations. One of the goals of the Opus College of Business is to develop and support highly principled business leaders, ethical leaders who create enduring value for society. And the Veritas Institute and the Center for Ethical Organizations contributes to that goal through their award-winning scholarship, through the practical advice and assessment tools that they provide to leaders, as well as through their engagement in the classroom. Now, the Winning with Integrity series was launched in January of 2016, and the series highlights the shared ethical challenges that confront leaders in athletic organizations, as well as leaders in other kinds of organizations, other parts of the business sector. Today's session is the third event in that series. And what we're going to do today is highlight how athletic experience contributes to the development of business leaders, and how that experience also offers insights into ethical challenges and into other kinds of organizational challenges, those uncharted waters that organizations frequently find themselves in. So our session this morning is going to proceed in three parts. We'll have three segments. First, we're going to begin with a set of keynote comments that will be offered in a conversational format. And we're very fortunate to have with us today as our keynote speaker, Beth Brooke Marciniak. And Beth is the Global Vice Chair of Public Policy for EY. And she will be joined in that segment by our moderator, Mike Max of WCCO. Following that conversation, Mike is going to introduce our panelists, all of who serve as leaders in amateur or professional sports organizations. And then finally, following the panel discussion, you'll have an opportunity to add your voice to the conversation during a brief question and answer period. We're going to conclude at about 10 o'clock after a few short comments from my friend and colleague, Bill Brendel, who leads the Center for Ethical Organizations. And then we welcome you to join us in the atrium for continued conversations of a more informal nature. A couple of things before we begin today. As you can see, we're recording today's session so that those who had hoped to attend the event and were unable to do so will be able to view the proceedings, and that video, when it is ready, will be posted on the website of the Veritas Institute as well as the Center for Ethical Organizations. Second, today's event is possible only because of the generous contributions of a number of groups and a number of organizations. And I want to take a moment to recognize our sponsors. First of all, for the second time in a row, EY is serving as the lead sponsor of this event, and we're deeply grateful to EY for their continuing support for the Winning with Integrity series. They've been an integral part of this series from the beginning. Silver sponsors today include two of our professional sports teams here locally, the Minnesota Vikings and the Minnesota Wild, and we're grateful for that. We're also grateful for the support of the Verite Group, not the Veritas Institute, but the Verite Group, which is an organization that provides interim accounting and finance leaders to businesses here in the Twin Cities. And in addition to their financial contribution, they've done a wonderful job of driving attendance at today's session as well. Bronze sponsors include our friends from the law firm of Zimmerman Reed and Twin Cities Orthopedics, which is an organization that the athletes in my family love to patronize. And in addition, for the third time in a row, the Twin Cities chapter of FEI has provided promotional assistance. So on behalf of the two organizing centers, I want to thank again all of these organizations for their generosity and for making today possible. I also need to recognize a couple of critical supporters here inside the University of St. Thomas. The Winning with Integrity series is really the brainchild of the current dean of the Opus College of Business, Stephanie Lenway, and we need to thank Stephanie for her continued support. And Stephanie, I think she's hiding over here if you don't know Stephanie. And then we are also grateful for the support that we've received from UST's Department of Athletics. They've been a wonderful partner in terms of pulling this event together. So with no further ado, let's get started. To kick off the conversation, I want to ask Michael Leary, the managing partner of EY's local office, to introduce our keynote speaker as well as our moderator.
Is this working? All right. Well, it is great to be here at St. Thomas. We're so proud of our association with the university and certainly this great series of Winning with Integrity. We've been, so pleased to be a part of it, and I think it's, very unique from what we've seen across higher education. So this focus has really been tremendous. I have to say, I normally pride myself on not having any notes, but we have such esteemed speakers here today that there's so many different accomplishments that we have to list out that I do have a few notes. And seeing the sellout crowd here, the standing room only is great, and a lot of Tommy's Purple, right? So I'm not a Minnesota native, in full disclosure, or a Tommy's alum, but I've adopted the university a bit because I also went to an urban Catholic university, so it really feels like home in many ways whenever I come to St. Thomas. We have a great first panel that I want to introduce. First of all, my colleague Beth Brooke Marciniak, that Dean mentioned, is our firm's Global Vice Chair of Public Policy. She is also our executive leader and sponsor of our diversity and inclusion initiatives. And Beth has had just a lot of leadership roles through the years. So when I think of Beth, it's always her leadership at the firm. She's been a great role model for many, many years, having an impact in so many different areas. But for Beth, I know she also has a lot of passion besides our firm and the community. Her heritage is a heck of a great athlete as well. So Beth was the first female basketball scholarship at Purdue University, so a great basketball player. She continues to be incredibly passionate about athletics, but also just doing a lot of really unique things with athletics and how that can transcend into leadership once you're off the court or off the playing field. So Beth has been very instrumental in creating a program for our firm and now the broader business community to help support women athletes making that transition. And it could be into business, it could be into a lot of other endeavors in life, but I think seeing that connection and a lot of the synergies between leadership from an athletics standpoint and how that often transcends so well, to being successful in other endeavors in life. So a lot of cool stuff that we'll get to talk about with Beth today as well. Before her current roles, Beth had been one of our tax leaders in our firm. She's very active in the World Economic Forum. And no pressure for everyone else, but she's also been named one of Forbes' 100 most powerful women. She's very modest. She leaves that out of the bio oftentimes, but I'd be remiss not to share that. So Beth, thank you for coming in and making the trip. And then many of you, of course, know a familiar face over here, this gentleman, Mike Max, who didn't have to come very far. We made this very convenient. We can look out the window and see your studios, right? So Mike, of course, is both television and radio broadcaster with WCCO, passionate about all things sport, and also a former athlete himself in 3 sports. Do I have that right, Mike? Basketball, baseball, and football, all at Hamline University. So you can listen to Mike weeknights, and you'll see him oftentimes on TV. So we're going to invite Mike and Beth up here to start the first panel. So take it away, guys.
You guys hear, are we on? Are we on? Yours isn't green yet. Testing, 2, 3, 4. Testing, 2, 3, 4. Here we go. I think we got it, Beth. Yep. Thank you all for coming here today. When they called and asked about this, I said, this sounds like a great topic to talk about for a number of different reasons. Then I had a chance to spend some time with you, Beth. Interesting concept, because I'm not so sure, in the reason that I'm passionate about sports isn't just because you grew up playing them. It's because, the longer you live, the more you realize what you gain from them. And I've often said I'm not so sure that we should look at sports as sports. I think we should look at it as one of the greatest classes that you can take, that we offer our young people in high school and in college. It's one of the greatest educational tools that you can offer your kids, and I have 2 kids, and that's why I want them to participate more than winning the ribbons and the trophies. You are a product of that, just barely, because you got to Purdue University just in time for basketball. What was that like, being a pioneer?
Well, it was interesting. Title IX was passed, I think, in '72, and I started at Purdue in '77. So it took that long to get Title IX implemented. So, I just thought this, having your school paid for was just really awesome. It was just quite, quite a surprise. But it is why I went to Purdue. So I would not have gone to Purdue but for the basketball scholarship. And what's interesting is I was 4-sport in high school, and softball was my better sport. But softball wasn't even a collegiate sport at the time, so there was no option to continue in softball. So basketball by default. But what was interesting about it is I don't think I appreciated it at the time. We were really just building Purdue's program, and the way kids are recruited today was so different than the way you recruited back then. So very different. But I think what was really more interesting to me was when I left Purdue and joined the workforce. And in much like in Minnesota, I grew up in Indiana. I started my career after a 2-day debacle. I did start somewhere else for 2 days, but I ended up eventually at Ernst & Young in Indianapolis. That's where I started. And if you played basketball in Indiana, in the Hoosier State, you pretty much walk on water. So as a woman, starting in the Indianapolis office of Ernst & Young, I should have experienced everything women experienced, which was to feel pretty excluded. To the contrary, I was like gold. I was just gold because I had played basketball. So I was more advantaged even than the men, just because I had the basketball credential. So it neutralized gender for me early on. And in hindsight was such, I just didn't even notice being a woman joining what at that time was all male, all straight, all extroverts, all Republican. That's just what that workforce was. And I was really different. So, but
you didn't feel different, you're saying?
Because of sports. Because
you never thought about it. You didn't walk thinking I'm a woman walking into work today.
They neutralized, because I had what they didn't have. I had played basketball at Purdue. And there was also a Notre Dame football player who had joined the office. He and I just had all the advantage in the world because of our sports background.
Now, this is kind of interesting to me because we were talking before we went on, and you talk about who you recruit into EY. And you said for a long time you got caught up in long resumes. And everybody wants to know, how do I prepare myself for life after college? Why am I here, and what am I going to get out of it? And we're always told to build up our resumes and do as many things as you can, and GPA, whatever it is, depending on what field you're going into. You said for a long time you looked at that, and then it came back to you that we need to look more at athletes. What happened?
Well, this is late. This is after what Mike suggested. We started this Women Athletes Business Network. We've been on this journey with exploring the connection between success in sport and success in business, especially for women. But as we've started to explore more and more of that, one thing that we discovered in our own recruiting practices at Ernst & Young is we had a built-in bias against athletes. And the reason is, you know, you got a resume, you know, you go to campus, you go to UST, you got, you know, you're looking at tons of resumes, and you're looking to see what kind of internships the students have had. Where'd they get internships? Well, you know what? Athletes don't have them because they're in the field. They're not doing internships. So what we found is if you were an athlete, you were getting screened out early of our process. And we only discovered that in the last couple of years. It's one of the things that's interesting in this Women Athletes Business Network is it's becoming a real message to business to look at the untapped pool of talent that we have left on the cutting room floor, where we're screening it out, or we've got the other thing that happened when we started this Women Athletes Business Network is we have female athletes in our workforce, everywhere, and we didn't even know it. So when we started the network, everybody's like, yeah, you know what? I played D1, I played D2, I did this. We're like, wow, you know, like a ton of our women were former athletes. All the leadership capabilities in the world, but we haven't been cultivating them. We just put them in the closet, you know, like, oh, that was my collegiate experience, it's done. So it's just been a real journey of discovery. So for business, I think it's a real message, because we found we're deselecting perhaps against athletes. I think a lot of businesses probably fall into that same trap we have found.
Let's go back even further, girls' sports, women's sports. Again, we were talking before we went on, and because I cover this regularly, and now I have a daughter that's 14 years old, and last night she's diving at the U of M, and I'm there for warm-ups, and I do the radio show. I go back, and I come back to the end of you want the definition of chaos, go to a swim meet. And you sit and you wait 2 hours to watch, you know, your daughter perform for 30 seconds. But it's so good for her and so healthy for her. And I'm watching her, she's 14, right? And my biggest concern is, like a lot of parents, she loves it now, but girls tend to drop out real easy from sports. And I want her to get the most out of her sports career. I don't care if she's good at it. I want her to be on the team and all the things that we talked about. Why is that, and how do we keep them involved? Because I studied the rosters last night, not because of this, and I was amazed at how few seniors there were swimming and diving, and how many of them were sophomores and freshmen. So I said, somewhere along the line, and it doesn't appear that it had anything to do with whether they were tracking right or successful, they quit.
Yeah,
Why?
girls drop out 4 times the rate of boys at puberty.
Why?
Societal pressures. It's not the cool thing to do. It's, you know, for a variety of reasons, you get made to feel very insecure at that point. And so 4 times the rate of boys, they drop out. And it's another reason why we think this message of what we're discovering with the correlation between success in sport and success in business is such an important message for parents to catch their daughters at that inflection point and try to encourage them not to drop out. Through this program, we just get more and more curious. So we started to say, could we research the correlation? We know it anecdotally as we started to talk to more and more athletes. We know anecdotally many of the women in this room were former athletes. So what really is the correlation? So we started to do research, and we researched women in the C-suite. So at the highest levels of business, CEOs, CFOs, CIOs, CMOs, we found that 94% of women in the C-suite, 94%, that is almost everyone, played sports.
That's astounding.
94% of women in the C-suite played sports, and over half played at a university level, so a more elite level. So, does success in sport cause you to succeed? No. Does success in sport have a very strong correlation to what it tells us is that what sports is equipping your daughter is she's going to have baked into her DNA the recipe for success. She is going to know how to succeed in every aspect of life, and in particular in business. And we see that. You enter the, so when I was that kid in Indiana, I entered that workforce. Thankfully, I de-biased the gender thing to my colleagues, but what I had inside me, I wouldn't want to compete against me. You know, I mean, like, it's an internal thing. You know, like, I know how to win. Fail, losing's just feedback. We know that. You adjust, you figure it out. You're going to go out, work harder, win the next day. So you build in that resilience. Coaching, athletes want to be coached, and you want constructive criticism. When I see non-athletes in our workforce, they want to be criticized. They don't, You know, they're not very coachable. I mean, athletes is just the opposite. And so they're just actually far better employees.
So how do we make sure, is this a marketing thing? Is it a what, that we keep the girls in junior high that are engaged still there when they're juniors and seniors in high school?
I mean, you help them understand this correlation to what they can be. When we started this network, I remember sitting with Nadia Comaneci. And Nadia Comaneci, the great gymnast, saying, you know, when I got done with my gymnastics career, I had no idea what my next step was going to be. I thought I could do two things. One was be a broadcaster, and the other was to go be a coach. And to this day, you talk to female Olympians and you ask them, what do you think you can be? Broadcaster or a coach? We haven't role modeled, so part of this messaging to your daughter and to even Olympians is you can be you have many, many more options. Not to diminish being a broadcaster or a coach, those are great options, but you can be so much more. And in fact, what we have found, and we're on to this research now, is female athletes, male athletes as well, but female athletes is where our focus is particularly seem adept to become entrepreneurs, which makes sense when you think about it. Failure is not an option to an athlete. That's just not in our DNA. And so you can take a female athlete who may know nothing about business, know nothing, but they've got a passion about something. And when they leave their sport and go start that as a business, they tend to really succeed.
I had an interesting conversation along those lines, not to go too deep into it, but with a national championship wrestling coach. And I said, are your, success? And I said, are you guys great entrepreneurs? Do they become? He says, no. Some do. He said, but most of them, they want to know exactly what they're supposed to do all the time, and they'll go through a wall for you. They're great employees. They're not great entrepreneurs because they've been so regimented in their schedule, and they just want the coach to tell them what to do, and they'll do whatever. You tell them to jump, they'll ask how high. How do you? Is there a difference between an individual sport athlete that you bring in and a team sport athlete? Are there different layers to this thing?
I don't know the answer to that. We get asked that, and we haven't studied it enough to know if there's a difference between individual and team sports. And the other thing, though, that would be interesting to know is there a difference between male and female? I suspect we're in a generational issue of female athletes perhaps haven't been as regimented perhaps as men. In the development of their sporting careers or maybe at a different stage to where female athletes haven't had as much handed to them as they've been more entrepreneurial actually in their sporting career. I don't know that to be sure.
Do you think there's an advantage in some respects for female athletes in business in that very few aspire to be professional athletes and make a lot of money? Now, very few males will make it as professional athletes. We've got one today that did, Trent Tucker. But the dream that they have is that they're going to play in the NBA, the NFL, or Major League Baseball, or hockey, whatever it is. Now, most of the time they're going to fall short. But along the way, they don't pick up some of the other entrepreneurial skills because they're living the dream. Whereas the female athlete says, I have to be ready for once college is over, there is no more scholarship. I've got to figure it out. Is there a difference in thinking there?
Absolutely. You're spot on. That's a huge difference. It's not just that the professional option may not be available. Even if it is, the women aren't going to make any money at it. Yeah. And so they know they have to pivot. Every step of the way, they know my sporting career is going to end, and I am going to have to pivot. So they're preparing. They're preparing mentally. Side story. My wife, Michelle Marciniak, played basketball at Tennessee, national champion, went on to play. So she was National High School Player of the Year when she left high school. Chris Webber, many of you know, National High School Player of the Year, same year Michelle was. They're on opposite sides of the Sports Illustrated story, her picture, his picture. So both National High School Players of the Year. She goes to Tennessee, he goes to Michigan. She wins a national championship. He calls timeout. He does not. Had to throw that in. They both signed pro contracts. Her with the WNBA, him with the NBA. Chris signs for, I think, $13 million first year. She got $75,000. You know, there were even professional options. You know, and it's not that different today. It is not that different today. Fast forward 20 years, it's not that different. So, long story short, is women know that they are going to have to pivot. So this message about your ability to succeed in business is really important, and it resonates. They're still scared to death. Julie Foudy, the great soccer player, you know, she said the day she retired from soccer, she said, everybody in the world thought I knew exactly what to do next. And she said, I didn't have a clue. So this program to help them prepare mentally to pivot, to prepare skill-wise to pivot, is really, really important. And it's also just to give them the confidence. The reason we got interested in it from an EY perspective is we just want more women in leadership of all organizations, but in particular business. That's what we care about. And what we stumbled into was recognizing that one of the greatest untapped pools of talent that we could tap into for leadership in business were these former female athletes. And we got into that by our sponsorship of the Rio Olympics. So we started talking to women Olympians and realizing, oh my gosh, these women Olympians are incredible. They would be great employees, and they're not thinking about working for us. They're panicked that their career's going to end after the games are over. So after the Rio Games, it's interesting, this year we tried something different. We hired 9 female Olympians who were retiring after Rio. 9, as interns. We hired them as interns. Don't know anything about accounting, don't know anything about our, you know, just hired 9 of them. 7 of them now have converted to full-time employees, just knocking it out of the park. The other 2 have gone back, they're going to compete again in Tokyo. So, you know, and now we're trying to get other companies to join us in this effort, realizing that these women they will succeed in business even though they don't come out looking like they're educated in any way that we would normally say they're going to succeed. But they are, and they will, and they do. And our employees love it because they're fun. I mean, they're fun to have around, and they're really inspirational, and they're raising the game of everyone.
I'm going to pivot again here because this is more in the news, but I think it's worthy of at least a comment. The female athletes that you prepare that go into EY or whatever, in the last couple of weeks, we've heard a lot about Harvey Weinstein and power over and all these things, sexual harassment, all the stuff that maybe some of you have dealt with in the workforce, which is, you know, beyond sickening when you hear what he's doing, and he's not the only one. You know, in this town, I've seen it, you've seen it, we've all seen it, where people are trying to use power to advance a romantic relationship, whatever it is. The reason that I want my daughter to play sports, I want her to have the confidence to stand up to that person, that Weinstein, that whoever. I'm glad that it's out there now, that people are talking about this, because it's real. Do you find that, I would guess that the person that's played sports is going to have enough or more self-confidence or a better chance to stand up to that bully, whoever that bully is, and advance that cause so that we don't keep living in the 18th century on some levels, in some professions?
Well, I would certainly hope so. I'll share a personal story with you. So I mentioned that I spent 48 hours out of university somewhere else. So I started my career in Atlanta, Georgia. It was the hot city back then. I was ready to leave Indiana, go down, join a firm, to be unnamed. I move in with a woman, mid-level woman, who needed a roommate. I needed a place to live. I didn't know Atlanta, so I move in. Within 48 hours, I'm a little insular athlete, runny-nosed kid growing up in Kokomo, Indiana. Within 48 hours, I realized that to get ahead in that office of that firm that I have just joined, you're going to have to sleep with the partners.
In 48 hours, you figured that out.
48 hours, in part. And it was really apparent that was the culture of that office. So 48 hours in, literally at midnight, I pick up the phone. I call the managing partner of the Ernst & Young office in Indianapolis, which was my second choice, which I had said no to. Got this guy out of bed at midnight. And explained to him very quickly the situation. I said, would you consider reopening your offer? I'm sorry I turned you down. Would you consider reopening? He goes, you know, we had 30 slots. We've hired 32, so we've overhired, but we'd never turned down a great person. He said, how soon could you be here? I looked at it was 12:02 by this time, so it had taken me 2 minutes to tell him the story, for him to say that. I thought quickly, I said, it took me 9 hours to drive. I said, Jack, I can be in your office at 10. Athlete. I got to believe
get it done,
this is
right?
athlete, yeah. It's the athlete to stand up, the athlete to make a quick decision, the athlete say, I'll be there at 10. 10 a.m., I'm in his office, and 37 years later, this is where I work.
So you tell me, though, what happened to the firm that you were at, and what do you tell the ladies in your profession about? I assume at that point in time what you did was leave, and that was the last time you spoke of, for the most part, what had happened. What are you called to do when you know that that's the culture?
Yeah. Well, you're now called, now, and I think this is what we're witnessing now, the Harvey Weinstein thing, but even in different issues. I think the changing social contract, and this applies to the professional sports organizations as much as it applies to business right now, that there is a changing social contract with the institutions about what is expected. We lived it after Charlottesville. My boss, our chairman and CEO, was one of the 16 CEOs that sat on President Trump's strategic and policy forum. So the 16 CEOs that advised the president. Doesn't mean they agree with, and it was bloody internally within Ernst & Young about whether we should sit on that council. But we do firmly believe that you can't make change if you're not at the table. So you don't have to agree. You got to be at the table if you want to make change. So we don't run away. We'll run toward things. But the weekend of Charlottesville, that was not looking comfortable place to be. And it's like this was an issue where we needed to take a stand. And I give the Merck CEO Frazier a great deal of credit for being one of the first to step out and say, "I'm done. I'm out of here. I can't sign up to this." We then kind of internally helped to lead the decision to disband, that all the CEOs would disband the council and step out. But right now, this platform, to your question of, what do you say? What's your moral responsibility to lead and to lead publicly and to make your values very transparent and clear has never been more important. Never been more important. And are we all getting it right? No, I think we're actually pretty far away from.
Well, and the difficult part is, without question, is that young lady that's moving her career in the right direction doesn't see, there's not a lot of counsel around when you're thinking about this, because you don't want to tell anybody else until you have to. And so you're measuring that, and you think it might be career suicide, or you think that it's going to be a he said, she said thing, and it's going to muddy the waters for you. What do you tell them?
Well, I think things are changing at this point. I do think things are changing. I was with a group of very, very, they all run their own businesses in New York City, fashion industry, et cetera. I was with them last week, and we were just sitting and talking, and they've all experienced. And in fact, some with Harvey, but they've all experienced the exact same thing. And they said, we see a change now. Our daughters would stand up. Our daughters would say something. We didn't. Culturally, it wasn't. You just didn't. You just took it and moved on. But I think as organizations, we have to encourage speak up, what I call a speak up culture, where people can speak up. It's why diversity in leadership matters. Is if people see people that look very different in the leadership of an organization, it sends an implicit message that you can speak up and it will be okay. You don't have to look just like them. You can be who you are, and you can speak up and speak out. And so I don't think people appreciate that. That's why a diverse leadership, there's research now starting to show that it sends an enormous implicit message to people that it's okay to speak out and speak up, and you'll be protected, because if you look at those diversity of views, they made it, you will, and there's messages to that extent.
If you're one of those people out there that is separating themselves, trying to separate themselves in the job force, and you're coming out of college, and maybe now you get 100 resumes from people that have pretty good backgrounds, let's just say as athletes, and you can hire 25. How do you get to the 25? What are the things you're looking for that are the differences?
Values.
Can you figure that out when you when you get a resume and interview them? I mean,
Not when you get a resume, no. But
when you sit down, can you usually?
Yeah. I think you can. I think more importantly, and I tell kids this today, it's like, pick your culture. Don't pick the organization that's going to pay you $1,000 more.
Is that what you say? Pick your culture.
Pick your culture.
That's interesting.
Oh yeah, pick your culture. Even over your I can't believe I started as an accountant. I mean, seriously, I was a computer. I'm dead serious. I was a computer science major. I had taken all my electives in accounting, and so I could sit for the CPA exam, but I never dreamed I wanted to be an accountant. I picked wrong at start, but then I got it right, which was picking your culture. And what I mean by picking your culture was I'm really entrepreneurial. Just an idea a minute, I'm very challenge status quo. So I needed a culture. I couldn't join a normal kind of corporate organization that back in the day you had to wait till the guy ahead of you either got promoted or died to open up that position. I mean, it was very lockstep, and you could tell that. And I knew I was going to I was an athlete. I was like, give me the ball. Let me run. So the accounting firm culture really fit me very, very well. So the other organization I joined wasn't accounting. It was a very similar organization, just with the wrong values. But the culture fit me to a T. So culture and values, more important than everything, because you're going to self-select out. If the culture and the values of the organization don't fit you, you're going to leave. And they're not going to suffer. Their culture and values are going to continue right on. You're the one that's going to suffer.
But it might be tempting because it might be an extra $10,000 at that time, and that might look like a lot to you, right?
Well, and kids, I mean, it mattered to me back then.
Absolutely, because at that time you don't know.
No, and they think they're going to jump around a lot anyway, so pick up. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think if you find the right culture and the right values, you'd stay. People who jump around is because they're not finding it.
Last question, and then we'll bring our panel on. I've always believed, because I get this question a lot, if you have a bad boss, and my advice always is, if you love your job and you have a bad boss, stay there. If you hate your job and have a good boss, leave. Meaning, if you love what you do, that's the most important thing. Is that what you tell them?
That isn't what I would tell them necessarily.
What would you tell them?
I would do something you love, but you got to do it in the right organization so that I would hope that you could love your boss.
Except you don't sometimes get to control that,
Well, you don't. You can move around within the organization, maybe get away from that boss. But no, I'm not a big believer in staying in situations that are not very tolerable. I believe in making change and rattling the cage, but keeping yourself at the table to do so. I am at EY 37 years later because I've stayed at the table. The other thing I like to tell kids is you can't make change if you're not at the table. I'm a big believer in that. So if you see people who get too full of them, like, you need to change, I'm trying to change you. Like, you've got to be diplomatic. You've got to work within the system. Because if I get too belligerent and arrogant with you, you're just going to fire me. So that doesn't, now everybody suffers, if you're the bad boss, now everybody suffers. So I just think you got to work within the system. You got to know your platforms that you have, and I think you can work on your platforms. Mike mentioned being on, the Forbes list of 100 most powerful women. I will tell you the best thing being on the Forbes list the first year I made it, the best part about that was it told the leadership within EY what I do outside the firm.
Internally.
Because they care about what you're doing for the organization. I like build your brand outside too. Make a difference in the world.
And a lot didn't really know that.
And they don't. Sometimes organizations don't really appreciate what you're doing outside. So.
Well, let's bring up an esteemed panel to join you in this discussion, and you've got the program, so I don't need to spend a lot of time with their backgrounds, but come on up here one at a time. Jamie Spencer from the Minnesota Wild, Karen Nelson, Legal Counsel, Minnesota Vikings, Michelle Morgan, Assistant Athletic Director, University of St. Thomas, Trent Tucker, Athletic Director for the City of Minneapolis, or the Minneapolis Conference and beyond. Come on up and grab a chair, guys. I'll ask you guys some questions, and then we'll open it up for the audience to do the same. I know it's a little tight in there, so everybody grab a... That's right. You can do this, right?
Boxed out. Where do you want, Mike?
Thank you, first of all, for all joining us and different backgrounds, but all with a place in the sports market here in the Twin Cities, to be sure. Jamie, I'll start with you. You played sports, and now you work in hockey. You played hockey, and now you work in hockey for the Minnesota Wild.
Let me make sure. There we go.
You okay?
What a great start to today. Thank you for all the comments. And I'm sitting here in my chair just thinking about how relevant that content is for me. You probably read it in my bio. I'm a Wisconsin Badger. I want to get that out right away so people can. Okay, I'm shocked they invited me, but it really, when you look at being an athlete and now working in a profession, and I happen to play hockey, so it's a perfect fit. But I played every sport. I love sports. I love what sports does. I've got 3 children playing sports. I'm a hockey dad. I'm a soccer dad, and the fact that this panel exists is exciting to me because I feel much like, you know, the panelists here, where I remember being an intern and feeling like, okay, I'm a history major. I don't have any background in internships because I was training in the summer. And so when I looked at the competition for jobs, it was daunting. And I wish, you know, and now that I'm in a seat where I can make decisions on, you know, employment and looking at candidates, it's nice to know that there are people that think like me, which is, man, if I see an athlete, I know intangibly what that brings. And I can look at a resume, make a couple phone calls, and that tells me everything I need to know. Because interviewing, let's be honest, it's tough. You can't really gauge who you're hiring. You try, you make assumptions. I've made good hires, bad hires. But most of the time when I hire an athlete and I can call my network and find a little bit of information, I don't regret those decisions. And when I'm talking to an athlete, it's different than talking to a non-athlete because we inherently kind of know. We don't use words like I'm too tired, or we just don't do that here, or I'm really busy, can you get back to me? Those words don't come out. It's more like, well, how can I help? Or sure, I'll try. Or when do you need it? You know, those are the types of things that get me excited. And I came as an audience member to these, and I was really glad when they put this content together and say, hey, winning with integrity. I'm like, that needs to be talked about. It needs to be male, female, in the workforce. I love that we're in a university setting, which we don't typically do as an organization. So it's exciting to be with you all, and excited to join the panel.
Karen, you came over from Cargill to the Minnesota Vikings. Now, for those of you, I can tell you this, having covered all the sports and been involved in all the sports over the years, you cannot begin to explain what it's like to work for an NFL team. You can't, because there's nothing to compare it to. There really isn't. And I even mean in all due respect to the other sports. And the reason is simple. It's a giant, as we have seen in recent years, in recent weeks, the effect it has on culture throughout the country. The president weighs in. All these things come into play at the NFL. You have 50, this is what I love about it, 53 players on the team with completely diverse backgrounds. Some are farmers, some grew up in the cities, some graduated from college, some have great plans after, some don't have any plans. Because you have that big of numbers plus a coaching staff, you have this wide variety of employees, and that's on the football side.
Right.
Then there's the side that you sit on, the business side, which is almost separate from the football side. I know people confuse that when you say you work for the Minnesota Vikings, but it's almost a completely different business than the football side. Mike Zimmer isn't going to spend a lot of time coming down and ask the marketing what they're going to do this Sunday. All he wants to do is beat Baltimore. And so the experience of working for an NFL team is so unique because it's like two businesses that try to morph together and work together. What have you learned about the uniqueness of the NFL and what you've seen in terms of what they're trying to be? Because they really are asked to be leaders for the country.
Yeah. You make so many relevant and good points. I mean, I'll say, first of all, I think what's really unique about, going from Cargill, 160,000 employees, global company, and then moving to the Vikings, 200 employees, more local, but yet such higher visibility, right? I mean, every single day I check the newspaper and check social media, what people are saying about the organization, what they're saying about our players, how we're doing. And that visibility, even though you know it, it hit me hard, right? This is a very visible organization. There's a lot of responsibility that I feel, and I know that everyone in the organization feels, whether you work on the business side or the football side, because of that visibility. So I think and I have a great team here, by the way, thank you all for coming, that we feel that sense of responsibility every day. And I think, to your point, what's been going on in the last several weeks, I think, unfortunately, our society, we are at a very divisive time. We are more divided than I can remember in my lifetime. And I think it is only natural that you are going to see that play out in a platform like football. And so I think I don't think that's strange. I think that you would be expected to do that. But it does create a lot of extra responsibility for all of us in how we handle these issues.
And leadership opportunities, right?
That's right. Absolutely.
Everybody's watching. Every Sunday now we're watching not just the game, but before the game.
That's right.
And what an opportunity for the NFL to lead.
Yes, absolutely. And I frankly, personally, I'm not speaking on behalf of the NFL, but I am proud of how it's being handled and handled by our players.
Michelle, you're at the University of St. Thomas. By the way, congratulations on putting that. I thought it was ridiculous when they said St. John's was going to play St. Thomas at Target Field. And all she did was get the biggest football crowd that we've had in college football this year at Target Field, 37,000 plus. So congratulations on your part in that.
Thank you.
Yeah. And you come MIAC, you played in the MIAC, you played at St. Thomas, now you work at St. Thomas and you're working your way up in athletics, but it's almost independent of the conversation. What did you learn as an MIAC St. Thomas athlete that's helped you today?
I dabbled in with internships and working with the Wild and the Vikings a little bit before I landed at the MIC at St. Thomas. So having that perspective, both as a student athlete and then going into the pro sports realm and seeing the differences of more of the business side of sport, and then coming back into an education forum and drawing on my experience as an athlete and really understanding and realizing that one being an education platform, but as coaches and administrators and as educators, we're in the human development business. It's our end goal to prepare these student athletes, as I was fortunate to be prepared to leave and learn those lessons, not only with a college degree, but to have those tangible tools in my toolbox to then go out into the world and be able to use them.
Trent Tucker, you are what we call rare air. You are that 0.5% that make it in the NBA. First round draft pick, New York Knicks, great player. Minnesota Gophers, before that Flint, Michigan, and on to play, win a world championship with, he calls Michael Jordan one of his good friends. You are of that rare air. The upside to that is you have experienced some wonderful things in life. We have recently seen, with the people that live in your world as you did growing up, college basketball, and everybody keeps using the same term, it's the tip of the iceberg. These shoe contracts, and they're buying kids, and it's the great open secret that we've all talked about for many, many years, and it's hard to prove, and it really just deals with the elite of the elite. Do you worry at all that, since that has been allowed over the years, that there is a culture amongst the kids that they learn that that's okay, that's an okay way to do business, and that's an acceptable practice? Does that bother you at all? Do you think there's anything to that?
Well, when you look at the landscape of collegiate athletics and professional athletics, there's so much money that's involved. And I think Beth hit it right from the start. It's about identifying the culture that you want to be a part of. You're always going to be tempted, with things here and there. But at the end of the day, you have to decide where you want to be and who you are. And as you look at yourself as a young man, especially myself growing up in Flint, Michigan, I knew that sports would give me a chance, to see the world, that I could be a part of. But I had to do it the right way. And for me, I had to identify the people who had come before me and look at their resume on how they achieved things. And My first mentor in the NBA was Dr. J. And I had a chance to sit down and talk to him about what it was to be a professional. And spending many hours with him, he allowed me to see the game differently and how I could approach the game on a nightly basis to be the best that I could be and have the longevity that I had. But in a world that is moving so fast and changing every day, and you don't know where the enemy is coming from, but you have to stay true to yourself. And once you realize that the path that I want to travel, you have to stay on that path. And Mike, and I've always said to young kids, the hardest thing in life to do is what's right, because there are so many people trying to take you down the wrong road.
Yeah, easiest things to figure out what's right, hardest things to do what's right, right? Beth, I want to bring it back to you again. Do you think, and as I get older and you understand what you've gone through in life, do you think the greatest value that you get from sports is succeeding or failing and having to bounce back?
That's the greatest thing you
Which of the two do you think serves you more, is a greater asset to you going forward? The success that you had, the championships that you won, or the times that you failed and you had to figure out how to get back up?
No, failing every time. Yeah, I found I learned nothing by winning. I learned everything by losing. And to this day, you learn your greatest lessons when you lose it all. You just when you do something and you hit rock, but that's when you're gonna learn. But I think, Trent, your point of just staying true to, who you are from a very, very early age, knowing that true north, and staying true to that. I think it leads athletes also then into a unique time of responsibility and obligation to stand for who we are. And even as individuals in our organizations, I think it's a very pivotal time for the NFL. And it's just a pivotal time for our country. I think with, we have a society right now, I think, Corinne, as you said, it just feels emboldened to feelings and sentiments that are obviously out there and have been out there are now coming forth, and people feel like they can voice them without consequence at an unprecedented way, which I think is extraordinarily dangerous for our country and for our society. And I think every organization, every individual as a leader in those organizations right now has to do a real gut check on what do we stand for? Is it really clear? Are the values of our institutions really clear? And then what are we doing to make sure we're having the right kind of dialogue within the country?
Jamie, I'll bring it back to you again. The Minnesota Wild were their inception here. And they hired this group that have gone on to great things. Todd Leiweke now sits number 2 to Roger Goodell, in fact, at with the NFL, and he was your vice president in charge of marketing. You got a microphone, okay?
Sorry, I'm writing it.
But at the time, he said something to me that I thought spoke to the culture of the Minnesota Wild and maybe why they set the record for the most consecutive sellouts. He said, our basic mission statement wasn't, we're going to tell the fans what we're going to be. It was, you tell us what we're going to be. And he said, they had seen places like Disney had failed because they thought they could tell you, they bought teams and they said, we're going to tell them how we're going to do this. And we went the opposite and said, you tell us what we're supposed to be to you. And we built the arena with that in mind, and we put the sweaters up and all those things they did because the fans told them. Is that the culture of the Minnesota Wild? Is that the reason that you guys have had
100%
unprecedented success?
Yes, and I was fortunate enough. June 25th, 1997 was day one for me, and it happened to be day one of the franchise. And I worked closely with Todd. In fact, he's one of my mentors. Followed him to the Tampa Bay Lightning for about 4 years and came back here. And really proud of the work that he's done both here and beyond. But yeah, I think the lost art in the world right now is listening. Not enough of us take time to, we're all talking and we're all giving our opinions and we're all. There's a term called empathic listening, and it's really, by definition, it's listening to understand first, then respond. And I learned that from Todd. He's like, slow down, listen. What are the fans telling us? Have you asked this person this question? And fortunately, I ran across a phenomenal leader early in my career that taught me that and said, that's a good point. we're so quick to want to give our opinion, or as the person's talking, we want to do a rebuttal really quickly. Yeah, but, and you're just waiting for your chance. And as a sports organization or a business, if you're not listening and you're not asking and you're not surveying, then you're missing the boat, because that's where you need to be spending your time. And we, from 97, you might recall our first game was October 10th of 2000. So 3.5 years, people say, what'd you guys do? Right? Well, we let the fans name our team, for example. We did a public opinion poll. Some of you may remember this, is we let the fans decide what our name was going to be. We had logo designs coming in, and I can tell you, because I was on that project, I was logging every single name request into a spreadsheet, and there were over 6,000 unique names. 6,000. Who would ever dreamt that? And that's really from the beginning. Our brand has been to be servant leadership. Is we're a team of the fans, and we've always been sort of that's our foundation. And to Trent's point, you got to know who you are and who you're not, and you got to know where you stand. And they call it the state of hockey. Well, we're a small part of it. There's youth hockey games. There's college hockey games. There's a lot of people that never step foot in our arena because they're too busy chasing their kids around rinks. And that's our culture, and that's okay. We hope they catch us on TV or their children come once in a while. But it's important, and we spend a lot of time on our brand, and our foundation is let's serve the fans. Let's listen to the fans. It doesn't mean we're going to be held hostage to them. You know, we don't take every single, like, I'll give you an example. We keep hearing about healthy foods. Healthy foods comes in our survey every year, and then we change our concession stands, and we don't sell any healthy foods. Because when people go to a hockey game, they want beer and they want popcorn, right? So you got to be careful in how far you go with surveys and listening and make smart choices. But at the end of the day, you have to rest on your values and your foundation. And we spend a lot of time, so when the crisis hits or your brand is challenged, you don't have to think about how you're going to respond. It's instinctive. And that's where sports, you know, your back's against the wall, the pressure's on, you're going to behave the same every time. You may not win, but you're going to respond with integrity and be consistent in the way that you approach those situations.
Karen, I mentioned it before, but I can't imagine the culture shock to an extent, just going from Cargill to the Minnesota Vikings, knowing what I know about the Minnesota Vikings, because everywhere you go, as soon as they find out where you work, they have questions that you never would have envisioned that you entertained, because they don't know how well you know Teddy Bridgewater versus Kevin Warren versus Ziggy Wilf, right? I mean, but they've got lots of opinions about the Minnesota Vikings. Now, there's two brands when you talk about the NFL. There's the Shield that Roger Goodell spends every day protecting, and then there's the local team. What do you want the brand of the Minnesota Vikings to be? And what does Ziggy and Mark Wilf want the brand of the Minnesota Vikings to be? The first thing we think of is?
Well, I think one consistent theme that we talk about, and that starts with the Wilfs. Kevin talks about it all the time. We talk about it whether we work in legal or marketing or HR, about being best in class. And I think that resonates with our employees, both on the football side and the business side. And, you know, hopefully what that means is that we ultimately win that Lombardi trophy, right? I mean, the ultimate best in class on the sports side. But it means a lot of important things when you're working for the Minnesota Vikings. And that includes, especially for me and all of my colleagues here, that we care very much about how we go about our job. We have to have the highest level of integrity. We have to be role models in what we do. And I know all of us take that really, really seriously. Every day when I step outside, and I'm not sure I felt this entirely working for Cargill. I mean, obviously a very ethical company, and I had a high sense of responsibility. But when I walk out the door and I'm wearing my purple, and I am representing that organization, and I have to be a role model, and I have to act in a certain way, I have to say the right things, and I have to be true to myself and true to that best-in-class mentality in every way. So to me, that's the phrase that comes to mind, and that's the phrase that we talk about consistently on both sides of the organization.
So when somebody screws up in a football team, and it's in conflict to what you would believe is an integrity life, and this is going to happen. 53 players, I've seen it all, right?
Yep.
And then somebody comes to you, as they do, and they say, I can't believe that so-and-so did this. It's one of your colleagues, by extension, with the Minnesota Vikings. What do you say? How do you handle that?
So I want to make sure I understand your hypothetical.
So let's say that you're at a cocktail party and some Minnesota Viking just got a DWI, and they say, there they go again. Typical football players, entitled NFL players, and you work with these people, and what they did might have been in conflict to what you believe.
Yeah.
How do you handle that, and what advice do you give to other people that are in a similar situation that work for companies where somebody does something that may tarnish the brand?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think it's relevant in sports and non-sports. And I think, first of all, I think the age of trying to hide things is over. We live in an age of transparency. And a former CEO of Cargill once said, and I'll never forget it, Greg Page, when he said, you know, we live in an age of transparency, and you better not have anything to hide, because things are going to come to light. So first of all, the idea of putting things under the rug doesn't work. I also believe very much in allowing, people are going to make mistakes. All walks of life, from the top of the house in all organizations to people who are doing all kinds of different roles. And I think that you have to acknowledge that, and you have to allow people to learn from those. And there has to be appropriate consequences for mistakes. And I believe that we have that in this organization. We also had that at Cargill. And you have to acknowledge it, people have to learn, but there are consequences for what we do. And I think that's how you build the culture, right, that you want in an organization. You have to recognize the things that people are doing that are consistent with your values and consistent with your vision and mission. And there has to be consequences when people are not doing the things that are consistent with those.
Michelle, like I said, I have a soft spot being a MIAC product of, but you have a chance to advise kids, and a lot of the kids that you are around I love the MIAC athletes, because as we talked about earlier, they come there and they know their life after this is not going to be sports, you know, and they get some great, I see Steve Fritz here and Dr. Tower. I mean, they do an outstanding job. I remember when they won the national championship in basketball, Dr. Tower did a couple years ago, and I asked him what he said to the team afterwards, and it was, I didn't forget it, so it must have had an imprint. He said, I want to make sure you understand, I don't want this to be the greatest moment of your life. I want it to be a great moment. I don't want it to be the defining moment of your life, because that would mean that you get 60 years ahead where we want this to have great perspective and context. And I've always loved that about the league and the conference and where it stands. When you counsel kids that get in, and they don't know where they're going next. They just know they want to get a good education and they want to play sports, but they're not sure what they want to look for after college. What do you tell them? We talked about looking for the right culture, what do you tell them?
I think first, any conversation as I talk and interact with all of our student athletes is, as a leader, I need to better understand what their goals and objectives are, much like in a business relationship and a partnership. You know, I need to understand their why, or what their true north is, to help them get there. You don't get in the car and say, I want to drive to California, without looking at a map or knowing where you're going. So that's first and foremost. I think then it's partnering with those student athletes to make sure that they know what resources and are available to them, right? I don't have all the answers. I'm not the expert, but I can help you find a person that is. There are resources across our campus, across our peer institutions, that somebody knows more than I do about that particular topic. So let's make sure to help open those doors. I sit here today, and I've been fortunate to be where I am, because people have opened the doors for me, and it's my job not to close that door behind me. So how do I pay it forward?
Kind of along some of those lines, the Minneapolis City Conference is near and dear to a lot of us too. And I had Tyler Johnson on my radio show last night, and he's doing an outstanding job for the University of Minnesota. But you realize, as you get older, what that means. It doesn't just mean Tyler Johnson's doing well at the University of Minnesota and he might play in the NFL one day, which he might. It means that he is now lifting the lid for the city conference, and those people that aspire to do something, can see him and say it can be done. And Carlton Littlejohn before him, and you've had numerous examples in all sports, in football, basketball, and baseball. But when you spend time in the city, you realize how much untapped potential there is there. How much great. They're not short on ability or talent. Sometimes they're short on the compass, telling them how to get there. What is it that can be done inside the city to take that talent and make sure that it continues on a path even if they don't end up being athletes in college, even if they don't, because the talent's there and the kids have these wonderful personalities. What is it that can be done that we can teach them how to win with integrity and understand that there are no limits and there is no ceiling?
Well, I think for me, when I first started with the Minneapolis Public Schools in 2013, there was a perception, you know, that things could not be different for the kids in the city of Minneapolis. And we had to change the thought process that things could be different. And with a sense of hope, you can move a lot of people. You talk about Tyler Johnson. Yeah, he was one of the kids that decided to stay in the city of Minneapolis and not leave for another school district. So he set the foundation, and now he has opened up that door. And it's important for all of us as administrators who work inside of the Minneapolis Public Schools is to make sure our kids understand how to stay on that track. One, we have to offer opportunities and provide resources to give them a sense that life can be different for them. But I think daily communication is very, very important. Helping them understand that by doing things the right way, the skies are unlimited for you. You can put yourself in a situation where you can be successful. And it's all about, as we talked about before, is changing how you view yourself as a young person to believe that things can be different. And you have to want to be a part of something that is greater than you. But it's going to take a total team of all the people in the community, all the people inside of the school district to make sure that we are putting these young people on the right track to be successful in the 21st century.
And before I let you go on that, actions speak louder than words. You are the athletic director of the Minneapolis City Conference because you did something late in life that you didn't know that you'd have to do again, but once you realized that you could not be an assistant basketball coach at the University of Minnesota because of this, what did you do in your late 40s?
Well, you know, back in the mid-2000s, say 2005, 2006, you know, there was an assistant coaching position at the University of Minnesota that was open. And many people had, you know, put my name in a position maybe that this job could be something that I could be a part of. And it wasn't because I didn't know basketball. You know, I played for 3 Hall of Fame coaches, Hubie Brown, you know, Rick Pitino, and Phil Jackson. I played with some of the greatest basketball players that you can name today. So you would think during that time I would know something about basketball. You know, but the educational side, I didn't finish. So, but by not having my college degree when I left college to turn pro, came back to haunt me 25 years later. And I realized then at that moment that I would never, ever put myself in a position again where that I wasn't prepared to go after something that I wanted to be a part of. And the message that I try to bring to young people today is this: you may not be good enough, and that can be disappointing, but you can live with that. But being unprepared is a very, very hard thing to live with.
Something you could have controlled.
Something, yeah.
So you went back, got your degree, and because of that, you now
allowed me the opportunity
director,
now to be the director of athletics, to be a part of the Minneapolis Public Schools. And you know, education is the key. And for a lot of the things now that we have in the Minneapolis Public Schools achieved on the field, you know, but the greatest accomplishment that our kids have given us over the last 4 years that I have been there, we graduated in 16 and 17, 98% of our student athletes with a 3.1 GPA. Participation numbers are going up. And Mike, as we all know, that 97% of student athletes who are seniors, that's going to be their last game. Mm-hmm. That's going to be their last game. You know, 3% is going to go on maybe to play college at some level. And you talked about that rare 1 or 0.5% that's going to go on to have a chance to make a living as a professional athlete. Today, the key message for us is all about academics, you know, because the sporting game is going to end for all of us, but your education will carry you as far as you want to go.
Yeah, and play as long as you can, right?
And I say play as long as you can because I know that it's going to end at some point in time. But by going back to school to get my college degree, believe me now, being out of school for 23 years and going back onto a college campus for the first time And looking at how kids were doing things today, I was scared to death. But the athlete in me said, I'm going to do this. And my, not professors, but the counselor that I had, she says, Trent, you can take your time. You know, you can do this one class at a time. I said, no, if I do this one class at a time, it's going to take me 20 years to graduate. I said, but I'm going all in. And that drive that you have as an athlete to succeed. And many people saying, well, you can go back to school and finish online. I say, my goal is to graduate where I started at. I wanted that degree from the University of Minnesota.
And you got it.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. And yeah, and they called you Grandpa Tucker on your diploma.
They did.
I
I remember the first time I walked into the class, and there was two students who were sitting there, and they kind of looked at me, and he was like, "Why is he here? Is he the professor, or is he a guest speaker?" I said, I haven't graduated to that status yet. And then when the professor did come in, he was going through the syllabus, and he was looking at names, and he got down, he paused, and he looked up, and he says, "Is this real?" I said, yeah, it's real. But you know, I'm a golden gopher at heart, and I believe maroon and gold, and I think that the University of Minnesota offers so many wonderful opportunities for our young kids, and I'm just trying to continue to show the kids in Minneapolis is that if you desire to have a higher level of athletics along with education, there's a school that's about 5 minutes away from you. Please take a long look at it.
Yeah. And let me tell you, he used to do a number on Joe Barry Carroll at Purdue. That he didn't even think about them back in, yeah. Beth, last question, then I'll open it up to questions. Along those lines, when you're looking at, again, that resume, how important is the GPA? How important is it that they just finish things they started? Is there a, as you look at it, and you've changed maybe the way you look at it, is there a 1, 2, 3 that you're looking for?
It's a balance. GPA is important. You know, you have to have that education, and it has to be good education. Values are incredibly important. You know, being an athlete is just, like Jamie says, huge. It's just huge. You know what you're getting. So it's a balance, but I wouldn't ever tell a kid the GPA is unimportant, because it is. But I just have to say, I mean, for kids, kids cannot be what they cannot see. And what you're doing is just phenomenal. So I didn't know the story about you going back to school. So that's really cool. Can I ask just one question?
Absolutely. Don't get too comfortable there. Now I'm the moderator.
Have a seat, Mike.
No, but you asked me, did I learn it? Do you learn more by succeeding or more by failing? You've had so much success in your life. Would you answer that question? I'd love to hear.
Well, you know, many people talk about not being afraid to fail. I've always talked about not being afraid to be successful, because coming with success comes a lot of different challenges. You know, the better you become, the higher level you achieve as an athlete or as a business person, there are so many temptations that come with that. And we never talk about how to educate young people or adults on how to deal with success.
That's a great point.
And you will always find many books, many seminars you can go to talk about how do you deal with failure. But how do we deal with prosperity? You know, you have teams that go on the road, they win 4 or 5 games in a row, and all of a sudden now they have their huge letdown. It's because mentally they're not used to dealing with prosperity. And I think, the more that we can begin to understand how do you deal with prosperity, it's going to help our young people.
We're almost embarrassed to talk about it, though, because we think it's egotistical to say, how do you deal with success, right? We don't want to say it. It's almost like it's voodoo or it's bad karma we create, because then we're going to fail. But we're almost afraid to take that on head on, aren't we?
Well, you have a plan.
To admit you're successful.
You have a plan, and you have to follow your plan, but you have to believe in your plan. And if you're a part of a team, they have to believe in your mission as well. And you have to surround people, or you have to surround yourself with people who think like you do, who are not afraid to take on a challenge if they believe the plan is the right challenge to take.
Be bold.
And I always say, at the end of the day, don't be afraid to win the game. Don't be afraid to take the shot, because at some point in time, when you're a part of a team, you're going to be in a position where you can help us win.
Fear of taking a shot was never a part of Trent Tucker's DNA. Once he stepped in the arena, that thing was going off.
Well, I just want to, right before questions here, because this has been on my mind, but a real big parallel between sports and business is fear. And
yeah.
Right? We all have that secret voice in our head that says, I'm not any good, I can't do this. And I will say that I didn't realize when I started in business how much that skill helped me, because as athletes, you're under pressure all the time to win, to compete, to get that starting job. And you kind of get conditioned that you rule out those voices and you fight through the fear, only to find that when I got in the business world, I was like, why are we so afraid? Why aren't we talking about this? Why aren't we just saying yes instead of no? And 90% of the time, it's fear. When you really boil it all down, it's, well, we're not going to be able to do this, or that goal's way too high, or the company will never buy into this. And so I think it's a really important, we got to pause on that, because fear, it governs us as a society too.
It sure does. And Beth, we probably could have done an hour on that, and because that's what leads back to why people don't do, or their whole life, right? The decisions they make is fear. Just give me a quick comment on that before we open.
Well, it's why athletes make great entrepreneurs. There is no fear of failure. They don't see the potential obstacles. They only see breaking through the wall. That's just, it's.
And Beth, I'm from Indiana too. We didn't talk about this before, but if someone showed me the stats when I was a kid that I was going to be a college hockey player out of Indiana, I probably would have been, thank God they didn't. But again, if you don't listen to it or don't know about it and maybe put your blinders on a little bit, it's amazing where you'll go. And so many times that someone told me that, maybe I would have sat back and said, well, I'm not good enough, I can't do this. And thankfully that didn't happen. And look where I am today. I've been able to make a career of it beyond the field, which is about the pinnacle of anything I can imagine being an athlete. So anyway, sorry, I wanted to comment on that.
Appreciate that. Let's open it up to some questions. And we've got a microphone out here. We'll bring it to you and we'll take it from there.
Jamie, this question's for you. You mentioned being kind of at the ground level of Minnesota Wild. When you guys started, were there organizations, whether in sports or not, that you tried to model yourselves after or take things from, and why were they?
Yes and no. I would say in the NHL, we knew that we were sort of on the very tail end. It was us and Columbus that were the last two teams prior to Las Vegas coming this past year. So we had the pressure of, okay, all the colors have been selected for jerseys. All the names are pretty much done. And so there was a real fear there that, and we didn't want to be necessarily the North Stars, but we knew we had to honor their tradition, which was a very challenging situation because there was a 7.5-year absence for NHL hockey, and there was a lot of anger towards the North Stars, Norm Green, the former owner. And I remember feeling that, and I think not growing up here actually helped me because I didn't at first understand how that kind of ruled us a bit. And still today, we're very careful about, we don't want the North Star players not to feel a part of it. But I'd be lying if I said we didn't look at other franchises and say, let's make our own unique spot in this. And that's where this whole place in the state of hockey became. The state of hockey, by the way, was a marketing campaign that we launched in 2000 because look at our roster. We had no all-stars. We were an expansion team. And through our surveys and research, and we just put a name on how everyone felt. It was the 3 words that describe us as a culture here. We grew up on ponds, frozen toes, taping our own sticks. And when we said those 3 words, it was kind of funny because, okay, if you think about it, you've been without an NHL franchise in town for 7.5 years, and you're going to call yourself the state of hockey? How dare you, right? We thought we'd get mocked, and it was the opposite. And so, again, going back to listening to the fans is trying to really put our place. And we knew what the other teams in town were and the support that they got. I mean, the Vikings fan support is real. The Timberwolves, I mean, look at them right now. They're the talk of the town with the new roster. So it wasn't an overnight thing, but we really, and to this day, are still sort of trying to figure out our place. And we look at that every year and say, is it still true? We do a brand exercise with an outside consultant that really challenges us because in 2000, the fan expectations are very different than today. And we have to honor that in the way that we approach our business.
All right.
First off, thank you all for your remarks today. This has been an amazing program. Beth, you've told us what your biggest ethical challenge was, and you took a firm stand and you quit within 48 hours. That took amazing courage from a lot of different perspectives. I guess I'd like to ask the other panelists, what's the biggest ethical challenge you've seen in your career or you've witnessed, whether it's personal or you've seen in some of your colleagues, and maybe a quick comment on that.
Great question.
I can start. Back in the early 90s, I was traded from the New York Knicks to the Phoenix Suns. Pat Riley had come in to take over, and I felt like that playing for Pat Riley, I would have a chance now to maybe win a championship in New York. But I was traded from New York to Phoenix, and I knew when I got traded to Phoenix, I was part of a transition, and they needed my salary, to make the transaction work. And when I got to Phoenix, and I knew that they didn't need me to be a part of the team, so I asked them would they release me so that I could become a free agent. And at that time, they told me, no, we're not going to do that. You can just go back to Minneapolis. You can go home. You can sit on the injury reserve for the rest of the year. You don't need to play. And at that time, I said, well, I think I may have 1 or 2 more years left to play, and I wanted to end my career the right way. And I knew that facing and bucking the system would be difficult for me. But it was what I believed that I had to do to have my voice heard. And at that time, no one had ever filed a grievance against the NBA basketball team. And many of my teammates, along with my agent and my family, told me at that time, Trent, you can't do this. You can't do this because they're going to kick you out of basketball. I said, but I can't sacrifice my integrity for wrong. And so I got on the phone and I called David Stern. And I said, I am not going to sit on the injury reserve and I'm not hurt. He said, so what do you want to do? I said, well, Mr. Commissioner, what are my options? He said, well, you can file a grievance against the team. And he says, I'm just going to let you know that you're going to be the first person who's ever done that. And I said, okay. He said, so what do you want me to do? I said, you're the commissioner, right? I said, well, then you do what you're supposed to do to protect your players. So he made a phone call to the Phoenix Suns, and he told me, he said, either you got to put him on the team or you got to let him go. They decided to let me go with some few choice words before I left Phoenix. But I had to stand up for what was right. And I knew that I was going to face some hardships down the road. And eventually no one called me for that entire year. I was kind of on a blacklist. But every day I went to work out as if that call was going to come. I had to keep myself prepared just in case the call came. And for 12 months, the call never came. And you began to think that, is this the end? Is my basketball career really over? And all of a sudden one day I went to work out one more time in late September of 1992. I get back home. We didn't have cell phones, but you had to go home and get your answer machine. And as I ran back my answer machine, there was this voice on there that says, and he used to call me Tuck. He said, hey, Tuck, this is Jerry Cross from the Chicago Bulls. I ran that answer machine back about 5 times to make sure that this was Jerry Cross from the Chicago Bulls. And I picked up the phone and I gave him a call. And he says, well, last night I was sitting with Phil Jackson and we were talking about bringing you in as a veteran player to play behind Michael Jordan. I said, okay. He said, but this is the dilemma. The contract is not guaranteed. He said, I know throughout your career your contracts have always been guaranteed. And I said, I'll take the deal. He said, you sure? I said, yeah. I said, Jerry, at this time, I have nowhere else to go, but I got the best opportunity in the world to prove what I can do, because what I learned from not going back to school during that time was that keeping myself prepared, not knowing when that moment was going to come. But I tell that story to young kids. Just imagine if I wasn't ready, if I wasn't prepared.
Yep.
Winning the championship with the Chicago Bulls would not have been an option for me. But what it did for me after basketball was over, it gave me a chance to start a nonprofit organization where I could work with middle school kids. And the guys who helped me build that organization were the guys I played with from 1992 to 1993 just because I stayed ready. Michael Jordan came every year. Scottie Pippen came every year. So those guys not only helped me as a basketball player, but they helped so many other kids in the city of Minneapolis achieve their dreams as well.
I just can't believe you never were able to beat out Jordan, were you? You had to be backup.
I just, you know, I didn't try to.
Yeah. Michelle, you go next.
So speaking in generalities, I don't have any good stories with Michael Jordan. But, you know, working in collegiate athletics, everything, you know, there's things that are permissible and not permissible, and we live in a world of compliance, like a lot of our peers in the business world. You know, and so there's defined rules and expectations that our athletes and our coaches and our institutions need to follow. And anytime that there's instances, you know, we're working with 18 to 22, 23-year-olds that, you know, sometimes their understanding of what the rule is or what is right isn't necessarily that we as adults understand it to be too. So it's that constant dialogue and knowing that these are the expectations and knowing and having that transparency that we've talked about today. I've had instances in the past where personal and professional relationships have come to challenge, to say, you know, how am I, as Michelle, as an administrator, going to respond to this? But knowing what my moral compass was as an individual, and knowing what the moral compass of the institution and of our athletic department with our leadership through Steve, is that I knew what was right, and it wasn't to be called into consideration because it was black and white, because it's been discussed.
Karen?
Yeah, I think the example that comes to mind for me, I lived abroad when I was with Cargill for 6 years. And so I started in Moscow, Russia, and then I was in Geneva, Switzerland, and then Singapore. And there was one very specific example where there was a business practice that I found out about. I was a lead lawyer in the region. I was the lead lawyer in the region at that time. And you know, I talked to the very, very senior business leader about this issue. I knew in my heart and in my head this was wrong, and I didn't care how much money we were making from it. I was also in a position, for the women in the room, it was a very, very male-dominated office and male-dominated business. I already was feeling insecure about my role there, and I was, you know, it's just really uncomfortable when you may not feel very welcome. And I had to come in and be the heavy, and it did not go well. And I stuck to my guns. I had this very senior male leader literally threw something at me in my office, and I took it to the CEO of the company, because I knew that we had to stop this practice. And there was probably not a strong likelihood it was even ever going to come to light, but I knew it was wrong. And the CEO sided with me. And that was a that was a true leadership moment for me. And when I knew that I had the strength and the courage to do what was right. And thankfully, the organization agreed with me.
Let me ask you one follow-up on that, though, because having the strength and the courage is outstanding. You still have to live with these same people.
Yeah.
Even though the CEO sided with you, he's back here, you're over there.
That's right.
And you have to consider that before you make a decision. Everybody does, right?
Yeah.
It's not just that you did the right thing. Now you have to live with the people that opposed you. How was that?
It was not good. So, you know, I'm not going to sugarcoat it that it was like some fairy tale ending for my time in that office. It wasn't. And that person in particular made sure that my life was hell.
But that's the real world. I mean, that is the way it is.
That was the real world. But I will say there were others that noticed and that respected me for it in that office, that I gained support from some other men in the office at that time because they knew about what had happened. And ultimately, I'm happy to say he was let go. This was obviously not his first.
But you didn't know that. You didn't know what it was going to be.
No,
I mean, you
didn't.
did the right thing without knowing.
That's right.
Jamie?
So I'll answer your question in two ways. One, first, ethically, I would say that in a job like we have, we get offered a lot of perks. We get access to things that a lot of people don't get. We've seen it in the media, and I remember young in my career, I started in ticketing. And I mean, flat out got offered cash and bribes and things that, you know, and again, the athlete in me immediately said, no way, you know, no way. And you've seen the scandals at box offices and Taylor Swift tickets. I mean, I have Thomas Rhett tickets right now. Those are worth $3,500, right? I could go sell them on Craigslist if I wanted, and people have done that. And I'm not going to name names in our market, but that's happened. So I think as executives, you really get put in an interesting spot sometimes with access to people, access to things that we just get because we're sports executives. And so I really try my best, going back to my sports careers, is thinking about doing what's right, and almost to a fault, frankly, where my wife's like, why don't we go to this thing? And I say, well, I don't want to even put myself near that. And morally, I talk with a lot of university students these days. And, you know, there was a time in my career, one thing we never talk about, I was divorced early in my business career. And I had a child in my first marriage, and going back to Todd Leiweke, I went to Tampa to work for Todd. And I spent 4 years, professionally couldn't have been better, but my daughter was back here. And I knew that she needed her dad more than I needed a promotion. And so I waited patiently, and again, the athlete in me decided this is where I wanted to live. I just had to wait for the right opportunity. And so I don't think enough we talk about the social pressures. So you're trying to be a great executive, you're trying to be, you know, all things to all people, and if you get married to the sport, you're going to wind up being a really unhappy person, in my opinion. You know, you have to have a good balance, which is hard in our profession, and it's something that I spend a lot of time now that I'm 44 years old, and I'm at that midlife point where I'm trying to talk to young kids that are considering this as a career. Don't be that person that winds up, I mean, they're not going to put on my tombstone how many tickets I sold, I hope. You know, so I kind of try to live by that a little bit, is keep a good balance and keep your life on the right path too, so you're not just selling out to the next corporate job that comes about.
And it's something that you people understand that it's hard to understand sometimes, is when you do live a public life, people are always talking to you and filling that public life, and without realizing it, they're putting, you feel the pressure, you feel that you got to perform, you feel that you've got to, because they know who you are and they know what your business is. And while sports, playing in them, being working for a team can be a wonderful experience, it's a terrible God. And if it becomes your God, you're really in trouble. And to your point, and you really have to be careful of that. I mean, it's almost a symposium for a different time.
Next month.
But it's all, yeah, but it all has to do with integrity. Let's give it up for our esteemed panel here.
I actually am going to have Bill Brundell come up to give us just a closing thought, because I know we're right at 10 o'clock. This has been wonderful, and this is always the part I'd like to draw out farther.
Yeah, and thank you everybody for coming. I think part of the deal here is that we've got these great speakers, and you've all shown up for this conversation. So, you know, giving yourself a sense of gratitude for being here and a thanks for coming. This is bigger than all of us, and yet I think it's been said in many different ways. We're all in this together, right? And I just want to say thank you to our esteemed panel again. Can we give another round of applause? So I often think about people in the crowd, and when they're watching, what are the things that they're picking up, you know? And it's sort of like a Rorschach. You hear what you want to hear. It confirms your values and your beliefs. And so I'm guilty too. So when I listen to these great panelists, I think about the world, I'm going to borrow your word, the world that is pivoting. And the ability to pivot in a pivotal time like this is really a competency that kind of goes hand in hand with winning with integrity. That's what it's all about. Now, to pivot, you have to be able to see things. You have to be able to rise above challenges and adversity. And at the Opus College of Business and at the Center for Ethical Organizations, we call that competency principled leadership. And it's not easy to do, and you can't learn it in a textbook, right? It's something that requires life. It requires the ability to take risks, to fail. And it also takes the ability to deal with provocative situations. So I hope that all of you today, when you leave here, because ultimately some of the best learning happens afterward when we talk in the hallways. I hope that all of you will think about and perhaps start with what was most provocative for you. Something that was said, an exchange, a question that was asked, and reflect on it and have the guts, right, to be at the table, to have that conversation, because we truly are all in it together. I want to thank our sponsors. So let's go through this one more time, because without them, none of this would be possible. Ernst & Young, the presenting sponsor. Our silver sponsors, the Vikings, Minnesota Wild, and the Veritas Group. Our bronze level sponsors, Twin Cities Orthopedics and Zimmerman Reed. And our promotional assistants from FEI. Let's give it up one more time for our panelists. Thank you, and thank you for coming.